I used to be a huge David Goggins fan until I heard about the work habits of one particular researcher. This researcher only worked for about 4 hours a day at most. He took a 1-hour nap every day, took really long walks most of the time, and most of his day in the evening was him spending time with his wife or with his friends. On the surface, if we kind of look at this with a David Goggins-like mentality, this guy surely didn't amount to anything, right? I mean, working 4 hours a day, I doubt that he's pushing himself. This researcher was in fact Charles Darwin, one of the most influential researchers of all time. And he's not the only one who does this kind of schedule. Albert Einstein, John Lubbock, Stephen King, all of these people followed a very similar work schedule where they didn't really work more than 5 hours a day. Hearing these stories and the ideas in the book Rest, Why We Get More Done When We Work Less, fundamentally shifted the way I looked at productivity and helped me move away from a lot of the toxic ideals that were embedded in me by productivity culture and by people like David Goggins. Once I started following the advice in the book Rest, not only was I way more productive, but I was way happier than I'd ever been, and my burnout had gone down significantly. So in this video, let's dive into the principles that help boost my productivity and help me get more done while I worked less. Let's dive into the first principle, which is more work does not equal more productivity. There's a really interesting experiment done in Iceland, where about 2,500 workers, more than 1% of the country's workforce, significantly dropped their working hours. They would either work 32 hours a week, having a 3-day weekend every week, or they would only work 35 to 36 hours, all with no reduction in pay. What's crazy is that productivity actually remained the same, or dramatically improved in certain cases. There were few to no cases where productivity went down. This immediately kind of starts to chip away at some of David Goggins' philosophies, where he prides working hard and pushing yourself as much as you can. It's clear that constantly pushing yourself really isn't the way to go in the long term, and there's lots of science for why this happens. I'm going to pop up a ton of studies on screen, but it's been shown time and time again that stress negatively impacts work performance, and the happier you are and the better you feel, the better you will perform at work. Work stress is extremely common among the American population, and again, any kind of stress negatively impacts productivity. If you want to get a better understanding of the physical effects that stress can have on your life, check out the book Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It has a great overview on this topic. There's also another study that specifically looked at the number of hours worked, and it found that as you increase the number of hours, productivity does increase, but not when you take into account work engagement. What was actually more important to predicting work productivity was the amount of engagement that workers had in the work that they were doing. If they had higher engagement, it didn't matter if the number of hours worked was higher or lower. They still tended to get more productivity the more engaged they were. So again, off the bat, we can see number of hours worked does not determine productivity, and oftentimes higher numbers of hours worked can lead to increased stress, which can actually decrease productivity. So already we can kind of see a picture starting to form where less work actually does lead to better outcomes and more stuff getting done. But this is not the only piece of the puzzle. There are many other reasons why rest is extremely vital to the human brain. And now let's dive into the second part of the video where we look at why is rest important. To understand why rest is so important, we need to understand the difference between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. You can check out the book Thinking Fast and Slow if you want a more in-depth exploration on this topic, as this video will be fairly limited in what we talk about, but the book Rest also does a good job of kind of covering this. The conscious mind is kind of the mind that we use for day-to-day tasks like simple arithmetic, talking in conversations, writing, etc., etc. The conscious mind is kind of what we use when we're actively engaged with any task. So right now, as you're watching this video, if you're paying attention, you're using your conscious mind. If you're reading as well, that's also a time when you're using your conscious mind. Whenever you're trying to consciously sit down and process some information, that's our conscious mind at work. And this mind is incredibly useful. Without it, we wouldn't be able to actually do much. But the unconscious mind is a lot more powerful than the conscious mind in many ways. While the unconscious isn't really good at doing stuff, what it is really good at is taking a lot of different abstract, complex information and kind of weaving it together. The unconscious mind is kind of always active, but it's its most active when we're taking rest. A good example of the conscious and unconscious mind at work in real life is kind of when you'll be stuck on maybe a difficult math problem or something like that. You won't be able to figure it out, and then you'll go to sleep and you'll wake up and you know the solution. What's happening here is when you're actively working on the problem, your conscious mind is at work. It's trying to understand what's going on, it's paying attention, and it's using the limited information that it has in order to process what's going on. And then when you go to sleep and you step away from the problem, your unconscious mind comes into play. It continues to work on the problem in the background, and again, because it's able to process a lot more information in much more complex ways and draw more creative connections, when you come back to the problem, you'll be able to see insights that you didn't see before, because your unconscious mind was working on it in the background as you were sleeping. The book Rest dives into a lot of the science behind all this stuff, and it's extremely fascinating. So again, this highlights the need for rest and why rest is important. If we're just constantly working hard, pushing ourselves as much as we can, we're not taking advantage of the incredibly powerful subconscious mind. But there's an incredibly important caveat here to talk about. Resting isn't just going on your phone and scrolling for hours on end and not really doing anything. Rest has to be incredibly deliberate, mindful, and well thought out. Good examples of rest can be things like going on a walk without any kind of stimulation, with no phone, no music, anything like that. Another great example of rest is obviously sleep. The more sleep you get, the better you perform. Albert Einstein notoriously slept 10 hours a day plus naps. And also doing simple things like talking to friends and family and having engaging, deep, meaningful conversation. Those are fantastic ways to get rest in. And again, a lot of these things don't really have the time to happen if you're following someone like David Goggins' work philosophy, which is to always be pushing yourself and doing as much as you can. This idea is not really helpful because again, when we're constantly doing as much as we can, we don't get these kind of periods for idle rest where we're not really doing much and letting our subconscious kind of do its thing. But rest alone isn't enough. There are things actually beyond rest that are really important as well. And these are especially things that not just Goggins, but no productivity YouTuber or influencer really talks about. What I'm talking about, which is mentioned in the book Rest, is the idea of deep play. Deep play is a really interesting concept and goes against the grain of a lot of productivity culture. This is where we do something just for the sake of doing it. What this looks like is doing hobbies where you don't monetize them, where you don't try to make any money off of them, you don't show them to anyone, you simply do them because they are enjoyable to do. An example of this for me is things like playing my guitar, playing piano, reading, or playing difficult video games. And if we think about this, again, this doesn't sound like something that's going to make you more productive or make you be able to accomplish more. Doing things for fun is something that a lot of people see as mostly a waste of time. But again, as the author argues throughout the book with countless examples of really famous historical figures, hobbies are important. Winston Churchill, as mentioned in the book, was really famous for his hobby of painting, which he engaged in frequently. Hobbies are incredibly important for our brain, especially things that are kind of creative outlets. When we do things that we enjoy just for the sake of doing them, this increases our well-being and our positive emotions a lot. And with these increased positive emotions and well-being, it helps us recharge, rest, and again perform better when we come back to doing our jobs. And overall, our work output is dramatically increased. This is again something that a lot of people don't talk about, especially Goggins. There's little to no mention of having fun in any of his books. But the thing is, fun is vital, not just for productivity, and I hate that I have to say this, but just for living an enjoyable life. Life shouldn't just be about working, pushing yourself, and doing as much as you possibly can. Not only is this counterproductive to actually achieving your maximum potential, as we've talked about in this video, but it also leads to just a more generally unenjoyable life. To me, that doesn't really sound like a great idea, where you achieve less and you don't enjoy your life as much. While it is a fairly controversial opinion nowadays, I feel like it should not be anymore. There's ample research and evidence to suggest that rest, play, and having fun and spending time with friends and family doing things that are not productive, where you're not pushing yourself, is actually incredibly important to be able to push yourself more than ever before. I hope that this video kind of gave you some unique insights into how you do your work. A lot of this was obviously inspired by the book Rest, but also the book's deep work and slow productivity were huge factors that influenced me to make this video. I suggest you go check those books out. I love Cal Newport and I love the author of Rest as well. So in summary, working more does not lead to more work being done, as rest is incredibly important for our psychology and for our ability to work hard and do more. And deep play and having fun and doing things just for the sake of them is important, not just for a productive life, but for a happy life. I hope this video helped you. Thank you for watching and take care.